On a cold autumn evening, a teenage black girl stood alone at a flickering gas station, clutching the last $8 she had. She was hungry and shivering, her backpack nearly empty. Yet, when she saw a grizzled biker in a black leather jacket slumped beside his motorcycle, she didn't hesitate. Passers-by averted their eyes, assuming the worst about the man, but she stepped forward. That small gesture of kindness, sharing her last money to buy him water and a snack, would set off a chain of events no one could have imagined. By dawn, her life would never be the same. 17-year-old Amara Williams lived on the edge of town with her little brother, Malik, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment whose peeling paint and leaky roof told the story of years of struggle. Their mother, Denise, worked double shifts at a diner off Route 49, doing everything she could to keep food on the table and the lights from going out. Sometimes, when the electricity bill was late, they'd sit together by candlelight, pretending it was all part of some game. Amara had learned early on that pretending made hard times easier. That evening had been like so many others, quiet, cold, and heavy with the weight of responsibility far too big for a girl her age. She had stayed late after school, tutoring a classmate in math for a few extra dollars. It wasn't much, but every bit helped. On her way home, she stopped by the gas station to grab a cup of noodles and a cheap loaf of bread for dinner. Her coat was too thin for the chill, and the wind bit at her hands as she crossed the nearly empty street. The harsh white glow of the gas station's lights spilled across the cracked pavement. A single moth fluttered near the buzzing sign overhead. The rhythmic thud of an air compressor echoed faintly from somewhere behind the building. It was the kind of lonely place where the world seemed to slow down. That was when she saw him. A large motorcycle leaned crookedly on its kickstand, chrome dulled by dust and road grime. Next to it sat a man who looked as though he'd been on the road for days. His clothes dirty, his shoulders slumped, his beard unkempt and streaked with gray. The leather jacket he wore was torn at the elbow, and the patch on the back bore a winged skull surrounded by faded letters. Hell's Reapers. It was a name that carried stories, most of them dark. Amara hesitated at first. Everyone in her neighborhood knew what people said about biker gangs. Dangerous. Lawless. The kind of people you didn't make eye contact with. She could already hear her mother's voice warning her to keep her distance. But something in the man's posture, something small, human, and broken, made her pause. The man's head was bowed low, his chest rising shallowly with each breath. A few people at the gas pumps looked at him warily and quickly turned away. One couple filled their tank in silence, then climbed into their SUV and drove off without a word. No one wanted to get involved. No one ever did. Amara clutched the $8 bill in her pocket, feeling the crinkle of it against her palm. $8. That was all she had left until her mother got paid in 2 days. She looked from the gas station door to the man again. He looked half frozen, maybe sick. Maybe hungry. Maybe worse. Her heart squeezed in her chest. Without thinking too long, because if she thought she'd talk herself out of it, Amara pushed open the glass door to the mini-mart. The bell above it jingled softly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil. She went straight to the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of water, then stopped by the small food shelf and picked up a turkey sandwich wrapped in plastic. The total came to $7.83. The clerk, an older man with tired eyes, scanned the items without a word. When Amara handed over her last few crumpled bills, his gaze flickered toward the biker outside, then back to her. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. Amara gave a small nod. "Yeah," she said. "He looks like he needs it more than I do." The clerk didn't argue. He just bagged the items and slid them across the counter. As Amara turned to leave, she heard him mutter under his breath, "Not many like you left, kid." The cold hit her again the moment she stepped outside. The biker was still there, head low, breathing uneven. Amara approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the pavement. Hey," she said quietly. "You okay?" The man stirred, lifting his head just enough for her to see his eyes. They were a pale, steel gray, sharp but tired. For a moment he didn't speak. Then his voice came, low and rough, like gravel scraping metal. "Ran out of gas, and luck," he muttered, half smiling without humor. Amara knelt beside him and held out the bag. "Here. It's not much, but..." He blinked at the sandwich, then at her. "You buyin' that for me?" She nodded, unsure if she'd crossed some invisible line. "Yeah. You look like you could use it." The man hesitated, then took the bottle of water first, unscrewing the cap with trembling hands. His gloves were worn thin and his knuckles looked bruised. He drank deeply as if he hadn't had water in hours, then unwrapped the sandwich and ate slowly. Not like a man who was greedy, but one who was trying to remember how to taste food. Amara sat quietly beside him, tucking her legs beneath her. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. They just sat there, a strange pair under the flickering lights. A teenage girl and a rough-looking biker, two people from worlds that weren't supposed to meet. After a few minutes, he exhaled deeply. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "But somebody had to." He chuckled faintly, the sound dry and surprised. "What's your name, kid?" "Amara." "Well, Amara, thank you." He paused as though the words themselves felt heavy. "Name's Jack." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it was oddly peaceful. Cars came and went, the night air humming with faint engine sounds, but for that small space in time, it was just the two of them sharing something simple, kindness without condition. Eventually Jack tried to stand. His legs wobbled beneath him and he nearly stumbled. Amara quickly reached out, catching his arm. "Easy," she said. "You're not ready yet." He nodded, breathing hard, then sat back down. "Guess not." She smiled faintly. "It's okay. Just rest a bit." When he finally looked at her again, there was a strange glint in his eyes. Not pity, not shame, but something like recognition. "You ever been hungry, Amara?" he asked suddenly. Her expression faltered. "Sometimes." He nodded slowly. "Yeah. You know what that feels like then." For a few more minutes they said nothing. When Amara finally stood to go, she adjusted her backpack and gave him a small wave. "Take care, Jack," she said. "Be safe, kid." As she walked away, she heard him murmur something she couldn't quite catch. Later, she'd remember that moment and wonder what he had said. That night, she returned home to find Malik asleep on the couch, a half-finished drawing in his lap. Their mother wasn't home yet. Amara quietly set down her empty backpack and looked at the bare shelves in their kitchenette. Her stomach growled, but she pushed the hunger away. She told herself it was fine. Jack needed that food more than she did. Lying in bed later, she thought of the look in his eyes when he said thank you. There was something in it she couldn't shake. Morning arrived gray and wet. The steady drizzle blurred the view outside their apartment window. Amara dressed quickly, pulling on her worn sneakers. She walked Malik to school, holding his hand as they crossed puddles. As they turned the corner onto their street, a deep rumble filled the air. It started faintly, like thunder in the distance, then grew louder. Malik stopped walking. "Amara," he whispered, "what's that sound?" Then she saw them. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. Lined neatly in front of their building. Engines idling softly, headlights cutting through the mist. The scene was surreal, gleaming chrome, leather jackets, black helmets, all filling their quiet street like a parade of power and mystery. Neighbors peered from windows and doorways, whispering nervously. Someone muttered, "What's a biker gang doing here?" Another said, "Should we call the police?" Amara froze. Then, from the middle of the group, a familiar figure stepped forward. Jack. But this time he looked different. Upright, strong, his beard trimmed, his jacket clean. The patch on his back gleamed proudly. As the other bikers turned their engines off, Jack walked toward her, a faint smile on his face. "Morning, Amara," he said. Amara blinked, completely stunned. "Jack. What's going on?" He gestured for one of the men behind him to open the back of a trailer attached to a pickup. Inside were boxes, stacked neatly, filled with food, clothes, and supplies. A few smaller boxes were labeled, "For Malik." There was even a brand new backpack resting on top. Jack pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. "Open it," he said. Inside was a letter and a folded certificate. A scholarship voucher from a community foundation, covering 2 years at a local college. "I don't understand," Amara whispered, her eyes wide. Jack looked at her, his voice rough with emotion. "Last night you didn't know who I was. You didn't care what patch I wore or what people said about me. You just saw someone who needed help. That's something this world doesn't teach much anymore." He gestured to the other bikers. "These are my brothers. We've done a lot of things in life, some we're proud of, some not so much. But we believe in paying things forward. You reminded us why that matters." Malik clutched Amara's hand, eyes bright with awe. Around them the neighborhood grew quiet. Even the rain seemed to soften. For a long moment, Amara couldn't find her voice. "You didn't have to do all this," she finally managed. Jack smiled faintly. "Neither did you." The bikers spent the next hour unloading boxes. Some neighbors, hesitant at first, stepped forward to help. A few even offered coffee or blankets. What began as fear slowly turned into curiosity, and then something like respect. By the time the motorcycles revved to leave, the entire street was watching. Jack gave Amara a nod before putting on his helmet. "Keep being you, kid," he said over the noise. "The world needs more like you." Then with a roar of engines they were gone. That evening, Amara sat at the kitchen table with her mother and brother, reading the letter again. Her mother's eyes shimmered with pride. "Baby," she said softly, "you changed that man's life." Amara shook her head. "I think he changed mine." Outside, the rain continued to fall in gentle sheets, but inside their tiny apartment, it felt like sunlight had found its way in. And somewhere out on the open road, Jack rode on, carrying with him the memory of a teenage girl who gave her last $8 to a stranger and reminded him that kindness still existed in the world. Weeks turned into months, yet people in Amara's neighborhood still spoke about the morning the bikers came. At first it had sounded like a rumor, something exaggerated to fill small-town gossip, but photos and videos posted online had changed everything. In one picture, Amara stood in her hoodie, raindrops clinging to her braids, surrounded by leather-clad riders unloading boxes of food. That single image spread far beyond their block. Within days it was shared thousands of times, captioned "Kindness knows no colors." Amara tried to ignore the sudden attention. She kept tutoring classmates, helping Malik with homework and working weekend shifts at the grocery store. But something inside her had shifted. The scholarship from the biker charity meant college was no longer a dream she couldn't afford. Still, what stayed with her most wasn't the money, it was what Jack had said: "The world needs more like you." One chilly morning as she walked Malik to school, a man selling newspapers stopped her. "You're the girl from that story, right? You made a biker gang deliver food." She laughed shyly and shook her head. "I didn't make them do anything. I just helped someone who needed it." The man smiled. "That's exactly why it matters." Soon local organizations reached out. The diner where her mom worked started a pay-it-forward jar. Customers could leave extra cash to cover a stranger's meal. A nearby church organized coat drives under the name Amara's Act. Even the school's toughest kids began small gestures, sharing lunches, walking younger students home, offering kind words instead of ridicule. Kindness, once seen as weakness, was suddenly cool. Jack kept his promise too. Every few weeks, a different biker stopped by their apartment complex to drop off supplies or check in. They never stayed long, just a nod, a grin, sometimes a new drawing pad for Malik or a grocery card for their mom, but their presence reminded everyone that people can't be defined by patches or rumors. One afternoon, Amara received a handwritten letter with no return address. Inside, on lined notebook paper, was a message in blocky handwriting. "Kid, the night you shared your last $8, you gave an old man his faith back. I used to think the road had taken all the good out of me. Turns out I was just waiting for a reason to find it again. Keep shining. Jack." Amara read it 3 times, the ink slightly smudged where raindrops had fallen on the paper. She pinned it above her desk as a reminder that small acts could reach farther than she'd ever see. By spring, life was still hard, rent was still due, her mother still worked long hours, but the hopelessness that once hung over their apartment had lifted. The walls seemed warmer, their laughter louder. Malik started telling his friends he wanted to become a mechanic so he could fix bikes like Jack's crew. One Saturday, as Amara helped organize a neighborhood cleanup, she spotted an elderly woman struggling with trash bags. Without thinking, she rushed over to help. The woman smiled, saying softly, "You're the girl who helped that biker, aren't you?" Amara nodded. The woman patted her arm. "You see? One good thing begets another." That night, lying in bed, Amara replayed everything that had happened since that cold autumn evening. She thought about how easily she could have walked past Jack, how no one would have blamed her if she had. The world teaches people to be cautious, to protect themselves, to look away. But she had learned something deeper, that compassion is not weakness but courage. She opened her phone and typed a single line into her notes app. Kindness doesn't end when you walk away, it keeps traveling in someone else's hands. She didn't know it yet, but that line would become the opening quote in her scholarship essay. A story about empathy, race, judgment, and humanity that would later be published in a regional newspaper. It inspired readers to share their own experiences of helping strangers. Months later, when Amara received her acceptance letter to the community college, she smiled through tears. The envelope, once a symbol of charity, had become proof that generosity builds futures. Outside her window, motorcycles roared faintly in the distance, fading into the hum of evening traffic. Amara whispered to the sound, "Thank you, Jack," and tucked the letter into her journal. Somewhere out there she hoped he was still riding, free, alive, and carrying that same belief she now lived by. That one small act can start 1,000 more. 4 years later, the world looked different to Amara Williams. She was 21 now, standing on the steps of a small community college, diploma in hand, the cool spring wind tugging at her graduation gown. Her mother and Malik stood in the crowd, waving proudly. She had done it, something that once felt impossible had become real. The scholarship that began with $8 had carried her through college. She'd studied social work, inspired by the belief that small acts could change lives. She wanted to be the kind of person who helped others the way she once helped Jack. A stranger who became a reminder that goodness still existed in unlikely places. After the ceremony, as families hugged and celebrated, Amara walked toward the parking lot where an old motorcycle leaned against a lamppost. She froze. The sight of the worn black leather seat, the gleam of chrome under the sunlight, it pulled her straight back to that night at the gas station. For a heartbeat, she wondered if it could really be him. Then she saw the man sitting beside it. Jack looked older, his beard grayer, his face weathered by years on the road. But when he turned and smiled, she knew. His eyes, still that same steel gray, held warmth and pride. "Didn't think I'd miss your big day, kid," he said, his voice roughened by age but still strong. Amara blinked away sudden tears. "Jack, how did you even know I?" He chuckled. "Let's just say your mom's good at keeping in touch. She wrote me a letter last month. Told me her little girl was about to make the whole block proud." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You showed up on the first day of my story and now you're here at the last." Jack leaned on his motorcycle, his jacket bearing a new patch, Reapers for Hope. The same biker crew, but now reformed into a charity network helping families in need. "Nah," he said, "your story's just starting. I just wanted to see how far that $8 carried you." Amara smiled through tears. "Farther than I ever dreamed." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a tiny silver keychain shaped like a winged heart, engraved with 3 words, "Keep paying forward." "I made that myself," he said, "to remind you that kindness doesn't stop when the road ends. It just takes a new turn." Amara clutched it tightly. "Thank you, Jack. For everything." He shook his head. "Don't thank me, Amara. You were the one who stopped that night. You were the spark." They sat together for a while, watching families load cars, laughter echoing through the air. Jack told her about how his biker brothers had turned their reputation around, running fundraisers, donating to shelters, mentoring kids who'd lost their way. "Funny thing," he said, "the world used to cross the street when they saw us coming. Now they call us when they need help moving food trucks." Amara grinned. "Guess people can change after all." He nodded. "You taught me that." When the sun began to set, Jack stood and pulled on his gloves. "Well, I better get back on the road. Places to be, people to help. You know how it goes." She stood too, not wanting the moment to end. "Will I ever see you again?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Maybe not. But every time you help someone, that's me right there beside you." He climbed onto his bike, the engine rumbling to life, echoing through the parking lot. Before he drove off, he looked back once more and called out, "Keep your heart open, kid. That's your true engine." Then he was gone, just like that first night, disappearing down the long stretch of road until only the sound of fading thunder remained. Amara stood there, clutching the silver keychain, her reflection shimmering in the chrome where his bike had stood. The road stretched endlessly ahead, full of unknown turns and open skies. She didn't know where life would lead her next, but she knew this much. The smallest kindness could ripple across years, change lives, and return when you least expect it. That night, she placed the keychain beside Jack's old letter on her desk. The 2 tokens sat together like chapters of the same story, proof that compassion outlives moments, that humanity can bridge worlds apart. As she drifted to sleep, Amara whispered the words that had once lived in her heart since that cold autumn night. Kindness doesn't need to be seen to matter. It just needs to be done. And out somewhere beneath the stars, the faint roar of a motorcycle rolled across the distance, reminding her that the road always comes back around.